In March 2009, the world believed it was watching a miraculous resurrection. Michael Jackson stood before a sea of cameras in London, promising 50 final shows, a dazzling, larger-than-life return to the throne of pop music. The public saw a global icon stepping back into his light. But behind the dark aviator sunglasses lay a terrifying, hidden reality. A 50-year-old man trapped inside a $400 million financial cage, completely unable to sleep for 60 consecutive days, and desperately whispering a forward warning to those he trusted most: "They're trying to kill me." What followed over the next 112 days was not a triumph of showmanship. It was a slow-motion, highly leveraged collapse, a fatal collision between corporate greed, psychological isolation, and a dangerous chemical illusion administered inside a locked bedroom. Part 1 mapped the blueprint of how the empire was built. But Part 2 dissects the precise, mechanical reality of how it was torn down from the inside out, and the fatal pharmaceutical order that started the clock ticking toward zero. This is the forensic breakdown of the final days of Michael Jackson. On March 5, 2009, a black SUV cut through the grey London drizzle, pulling up to the back entrance of the O2 Arena. Inside sat a 50-year-old man wearing oversized sunglasses, a heavy wig, and a tailored jacket embroidered with silver thread. Beyond the backstage curtains, 3,000 screaming fans and hundreds of international journalists waited in a state of fevered anticipation. When Michael Jackson took the podium, the noise was deafening. He raised his hands, flashed a frail smile, and uttered a brief, 11-word declaration: "This is it. This is the final curtain call. I love you." The public saw a global icon announcing a triumphant 10-night residency. What they did not see was the financial ledger sitting in the offices of his advisors. Jackson was operating under an estimated $400 million in personal debt. His primary revenue-generating assets, including his 50% stake in the Sony/ATV music publishing catalog, were heavily encumbered by bank loans. He was living in a rented Holmby Hills mansion at a cost of $100,000 a month, with virtually no liquid cash reserves left to service his lifestyle or his interest payments. Within 48 hours of that announcement, the machinery of corporate leverage swung into action. Seeing an unprecedented ticket demand that crashed booking servers across Europe, concert promoter AEG Live expanded the contract. 10 shows became 30. 30 became 50. Jackson was locked into a grueling performance schedule stretching from July 2009 to March 2010. To finance the massive production, complete with complex illusion rigs, high-definition LED displays, and a 40-person backing cast, AEG Live advanced tens of millions of dollars. The legal contract contained a devastating financial clause: if Jackson defaulted on the schedule, AEG held the right to liquidate his remaining assets, take control of his music publishing rights, and seize his personal property to recoup their capital. Jackson was trapped in a binary outcome: perform 50 dates at the age of 50, or face absolute financial annihilation. But as the production team began designing the stage in Los Angeles, an invisible, biological crisis was already unfolding behind the gates of 10,000 Carrollwood Drive. Jackson had not experienced true, restorative sleep in weeks. His nervous system was locked in a state of perpetual hyperarousal, wired by adrenaline and crushed by the looming weight of the arena schedule. He needed a solution that extended far beyond over-the-counter sedatives or standard psychiatric prescriptions. On April 6, 2009, a decision was made that set the countdown in motion. A specific pharmaceutical order was placed, introducing a surgical anesthetic into a residential master bedroom. By early April 2009, Jackson's search for sleep had become an obsession. He reached out to Sherilyn Lee, an experienced holistic nurse practitioner who had been treating him for nutritional deficiencies and physical fatigue. During a private consultation inside his dimly lit bedroom, Jackson bypassed discussions about diet, acupuncture, or herbal therapy. He looked directly at Lee and asked for a specific chemical compound, Diprivan. When Lee expressed confusion, Jackson clarified. He referred to it simply as milk. The term came from its appearance, a thick, opaque, white emulsion formed by suspending propofol in a mixture of soybean oil, glycerol, and egg lecithin. Lee, recognizing the extreme danger of the request, immediately refused. She explained the clinical reality of propofol to Jackson in stark, unyielding terms. Propofol is not a sleep medication. It is a powerful intravenous hypnotic agent engineered strictly for surgical anesthesia inside hospital operating rooms. It operates by enhancing the activity of the brain's primary inhibitory neurotransmitter, GABA, rapidly shutting down central nervous system function. When administered correctly in a clinical setting, it induces a state of deep unconsciousness, rendering a patient insensate to surgical trauma. However, it completely bypasses the complex neural architecture that creates natural sleep. Under propofol, the brain does not cycle through non-REM deep sleep or rapid eye movement, REM, dream states. Instead, the brain is placed into a temporary, chemically induced coma. Lee delivered a direct, prophetic warning: if you take this drug, you might not wake up to hear the applause. Frustrated by her refusal, Jackson severed ties with Lee and turned his attention to Dr. Conrad Murray. Murray was a cardiologist with clinics in Houston and Las Vegas who had previously treated Jackson's children for minor ailments. Murray was facing mounting personal financial problems, including back taxes, unpaid child support judgments, and severe business debts. When Jackson proposed bringing Murray onto the This Is It team as his dedicated personal physician, Murray accepted. Negotiations began with AEG Live for a contract worth $150,000 per month. Though the contract was never fully signed by all corporate officers, Murray immediately assumed his duties. On April 6, 2009, Murray placed his first bulk order of propofol through a pharmacy in Las Vegas, directing the shipments to his girlfriend's apartment in Santa Monica, California. Over the next 2 months, Murray ordered more than 4 gallons of the surgical anesthetic, along with heavy sedatives including lorazepam, midazolam, and Valium. Every night, inside the second-floor master bedroom at Carrollwood Drive, Murray constructed an improvised operating theater. He set up an intravenous drip stand, attached 4 bags of saline, and introduced propofol directly into Jackson's bloodstream. Jackson finally achieved his chemical blackout. Night after night, he drifted into an artificial coma, believing he was getting the rest required to save his career. But as the calendar turned from April to May, the biological cost of 60 days without real REM sleep began to fracture his mind, setting off a wave of alarming behavior that his inner circle could not comprehend. By mid-May 2009, the psychological and physical deterioration of Michael Jackson was accelerating at a dangerous pace. On May 20, paparazzi photographed him stepping out of a dermatologist's office in Beverly Hills. The images sent shockwaves through the media. Standing nearly 6 feet tall, Jackson appeared emaciated, his weight hovering around a frail 130 pounds. His skin was pale, his hands were trembling, and his walk was slow and uncoordinated. Inside the Carrollwood estate, Jackson's behavior grew increasingly volatile and paranoid. The human brain cannot function indefinitely without natural sleep. Prolonged REM sleep deprivation causes severe cognitive degradation, memory loss, emotional dysregulation, and auditory and visual hallucinations. Jackson was effectively living in a waking nightmare, unable to separate real-world corporate pressures from internal paranoia. He began approaching his head of security, Fahim Muhammad, his interim manager, and his sister LaToya with frantic, whispered assertions. He claimed that invisible forces were monitoring his phone lines, tapping his house, and tracking his movements. He repeatedly stated that his life was in imminent danger because of the immense value of his music publishing catalog. On scraps of paper, sticky notes, and notepad pages, Jackson wrote frantic, scattered messages in heavy marker, hiding them in drawers and under mattresses throughout the house. The core message was always the same: they are going to kill me. To Jackson, the danger was external, a shadowy network of corporate executives, lawyers, and industry figures plotting his downfall to seize his assets. But the mechanical reality was that his body was starving from the inside out. Propofol suppressed his natural breathing reflex night after night, causing microepisodes of hypoxia, oxygen deprivation to the brain, which worsened his mental confusion. Simultaneously, the pressure from AEG Live was escalating. Production rehearsals were moving into high gear at the Forum and the Staples Center in Los Angeles. Millions of dollars were being spent daily on staging, pyrotechnics, lighting, and wardrobe. Reports began filtering back to executive offices that Jackson was missing scheduled rehearsals, arriving hours late, or appearing completely disoriented when he did show up. The corporate apparatus responded with ironclad authority. Jackson was reminded that if he failed to meet the rehearsal schedule, the contract would be terminated for breach, triggering the immediate foreclosure of his assets. Trapped in a vice between his fracturing mental state and an unyielding corporate deadline, Jackson forced himself to attend rehearsals. But when he stepped onto the cold, echoing floor of the Staples Center in early June, the physical reality of his collapse could no longer be hidden behind dark sunglasses. On June 13, 2009, the This Is It production moved its operations inside the massive interior of the Staples Center in downtown Los Angeles. It was supposed to be the final polish for a show designed to redefine live entertainment. Instead, it became the site of a tragic human breakdown. Between June 13 and June 18, Jackson missed multiple crucial rehearsals. When he did appear, staff members in the wardrobe and makeup trailers were horrified by his physical condition. Makeup artist Karen Fay, who had worked with Jackson for decades, observed that he was stoic, shivering, and visibly emaciated. His clothes hung off his bone structure. She noted that he seemed incapable of retaining simple choreography that he had executed effortlessly for 30 years. The breaking point arrived on Friday, June 19, 2009. Show director Kenny Ortega, a veteran choreographer who had worked with Jackson since the Dangerous tour, arrived at the arena expecting a full run-through. What he found was a man in total physical and emotional collapse. Jackson was sitting on a couch in a back room, wrapped in multiple heavy coats and blankets despite the warm summer weather. He was shivering violently, unable to regulate his internal body temperature. His eyes were unfocused, his speech was slurred, and he was physically unable to feed himself a small plate of food. When Ortega tried to walk him through the stage cues, Jackson was lost, confused, and trembling. Ortega canceled the rehearsal, wrapped Jackson in blankets, and sat with him until he was stable enough to be driven home. At midnight on June 20th, Ortega sat at his computer and drafted an urgent, desperate email to Randy Phillips, the CEO of AEG Live. Ortega wrote, "He was cold, weak, and shivering. He is showing signs of paranoia, anxiety, and obsessive-like behavior. I believe the best thing we can do is get a top psychiatrist to evaluate him immediately. He is not ready for this." The response from the corporate structure was immediate, swift, and protective of the production schedule. On June 20th, a high-level meeting was convened at Jackson's Carrollwood estate. Present at the meeting were Randy Phillips, Dr. Conrad Murray, Kenny Ortega, and Michael Jackson. During this meeting, the financial stakes were made clear. Dr. Murray pushed back hard against Ortega's warnings, asserting his exclusive authority as Jackson's physician. Murray explicitly told Ortega to stop playing doctor and insisting that Michael was physically and mentally capable of performing. Phillips backed Murray, reminding everyone of the massive financial investments already committed and the catastrophic consequences of a cancellation. The corporate pressure produced its intended effect. The medical warnings were brushed aside, and the schedule moved forward. Under intense pressure to prove he was still capable of leading the production, Jackson returned to the arena 3 days later. On the night of June 23, Jackson stepped onto the Staples Center stage and delivered an astonishing, explosive rehearsal performance of Smooth Criminal and Thriller. It was a staggering display of sheer willpower, a legendary performer summoning every remaining drop of physical energy to keep his world from collapsing. The crew cheered. The executives breathed a sigh of relief. The comeback appeared to be back on track. But it was a temporary illusion. Within 24 hours, Jackson would leave the arena for the last time, stepping straight into a chemical spiral from which there was no escape. Wednesday, June 24, 2009. The temperature in Los Angeles reached 80 degrees. Inside the Staples Center, final dress rehearsals were underway. Jackson arrived in the late afternoon, appearing focused and alert. He worked through technical cues, adjusted sound levels, and conferred with his band leader, Michael Bearden. At approximately 10 p.m., Jackson took the stage for what would be his final performance. He ran through Billie Jean, Earth Song, and They Don't Care About Us. His vocals were crisp, and his footwork was sharp. Those present in the empty arena noted that he seemed vibrant and energized. At 11:45 p.m., the rehearsal concluded. Jackson descended the stage steps, hugged his dancers, and walked toward the backstage exit. As he left the arena, he smiled, waved to a small group of dedicated fans waiting near the security gates, and stepped into his dark sedan. He arrived at 10,000 Carrollwood Drive at approximately 12:30 a.m. on Thursday, June 25. He was met at the door by his personal staff and walked up the grand staircase to his private quarters on the second floor. Physically exhausted from the intense rehearsal, Jackson was also mentally wired. The adrenaline pumping through his system made natural rest impossible. He changed into loose pajama pants and a t-shirt and called for Dr. Murray. What followed over the next 10 hours was a relentless chemical assault on Jackson's central nervous system. A desperate, unstructured attempt to force an exhausted body into unconsciousness. 1 a.m., Jackson lay in his bed, complaining of severe fatigue but unable to close his eyes. Murray administered a 10 mg tablet of Valium, diazepam, a standard oral sedative. It had no effect. 2 a.m., Jackson remained wide awake. Murray set up an intravenous line and injected 2 mg of lorazepam, a potent short-acting anti-anxiety drug. Jackson's brain resisted the sedation. 3 a.m. Growing anxious, Jackson repeatedly told Murray that without sleep, he would be forced to cancel rehearsals, destroying his career. Murray introduced 2 mg of midazolam, another strong central nervous system depressant, directly into the foreline. Jackson remained awake. 5 a.m., as the hours ticked away, Murray repeated the dosage, administering a second 2 mg injection of lorazepam. 7:30 a.m. With daylight creeping through the bedroom curtains, Murray pushed a second 2 mg dose of midazolam into the fore. By mid-morning, Jackson's body was flooded with a toxic cocktail of benzodiazepines, yet his nervous system remained in a state of high tension. He lay on his back, eyes open, continuously pleading with Murray for his milk. He insisted that propofol was the only substance that could quiet his mind. At 10:40 a.m., exhausted, badgered, and lacking essential monitoring equipment, Dr. Murray gave in. He reached into his bag, pulled out a 20 ml vial of propofol, and drew 25 mg into a syringe. He injected the milky white fluid directly into the foreline, combining it with the heavy load of sedatives already circulating in Jackson's bloodstream. Jackson's eyes fluttered closed. His muscles relaxed. Within seconds, his brain slipped into a deep, chemical coma. Satisfied that his patient was finally resting, Dr. Murray stepped away from the bedside. He walked out of the master bedroom and into an adjacent hallway, leaving a heavily sedated, unmonitored patient alone in the dark. Dr. Conrad Murray later claimed to police investigators that he left Jackson's bedside for a mere 2 minutes to use the restroom. However, cellular telephone records subpoenaed by the Los Angeles Police Department painted a drastically different, undeniable picture. Between 10:43 a.m. and 11:51 a.m., Murray was continuously engaged on his personal mobile phone. He made and received multiple calls to his medical clinic in Houston, his personal assistant, and various associates. During this crucial 78-minute window, no one was monitoring Jackson's vital signs. Inside the darkened bedroom, the chemical combination reached a fatal tipping point. Propofol and benzodiazepines act synergistically. When combined, their depressive effects on the central nervous system are multiplied. Jackson's respiratory drive began to slow. His breathing grew shallow, irregular, and quiet, until it ceased entirely. Without oxygen, his brain entered anoxia. His heart muscle, deprived of oxygenated blood, began to falter, slipping from a normal rhythm into bradycardia, and finally into full cardiac arrest. The king of pop was suffocating silently in his own bed. At approximately 11:56 a.m., Murray finally ended his phone calls and re-entered the master bedroom. He walked over to the bed and checked for a pulse. Jackson's skin was cool to the touch. His pupils were fixed and dilated. There was no femoral pulse, and no air was moving through his airway. Panic set in, replacing medical protocol. Instead of picking up a telephone to dial 911 immediately, a basic action that would have dispatched emergency paramedics with advanced resuscitation equipment within 3 minutes, Murray attempted manual CPR himself. He performed the compressions using a flawed, one-handed technique. Crucially, he performed these compressions directly on the soft mattress of Jackson's bed, rather than moving the body down onto the hard, flat surface of the floor. The soft mattress absorbed the force of every push, rendering the chest compressions mechanically useless and failing to circulate blood to the brain. As precious minutes ticked away, Murray refused to call 911 directly, fearing the immediate arrival of police and emergency personnel at the estate. At 12 p.m., Murray ran out of the bedroom, leaned over the second-floor banister, and screamed down to the kitchen staff for help. Jackson's young son, Prince, was summoned upstairs, where he stood in shock in the doorway, watching his father lie motionless on the bed while Murray attempted resuscitation. At 12:15 p.m., personal security guard Alberto Alvarez entered the room. Rather than directing Alvarez to dial 911 immediately, Murray pointed to various vials, 4 bags, and syringes scattered around the room. He instructed Alvarez to pack the medical items into canvas bags before calling emergency services. Alvarez complied, stashing empty vials of propofol, saline bags, and used needles into bags in the closet. Finally, at 12:21 p.m., 82 full minutes after Jackson stopped breathing, Alvarez pulled out his mobile phone and placed the call to the Los Angeles Fire Department. The audio recording of that 911 call captured the sheer chaos inside the room. "We have a gentleman here that needs help and he's not breathing. He's not responding to CPR, anything. He's on the bed, he's on the bed. Dr. Murray's the only one here." The call was dispatched to LAFD Engine Company 71. The paramedics arrived at the gates of 10,000 Carrollwood Drive in less than 3 minutes. But as they rushed up the grand staircase with their medical kits, they were stepping into a crime scene where the vital window for brain survival had already closed. At 12:26 p.m., paramedics Richardson Neff and Martin Blunt pushed through the doors of the master bedroom. The scene they encountered was grim. Michael Jackson was lying on his back, skin pale and gray, eyes open, and pupils fully dilated. A medical drip stand stood near the bed, along with a urinary catheter and an oxygen tank that was completely empty. Son Neff immediately checked for vital signs. There was no breathing, no carotid pulse, and no heart activity on the cardiac monitor. The monitor displayed a flat line, asystole. When Son Neff questioned Murray about Jackson's underlying medical conditions and the medications he had administered, Murray withheld critical information. He failed to mention propofol entirely. He claimed that Jackson was suffering from dehydration and exhaustion, and that he had only administered a small dose of the mild sedative lorazepam hours earlier. Relying on incomplete medical information, the paramedics spent 42 minutes executing advanced cardiac life support protocols inside the bedroom. They intubated Jackson, established 4 access, and administered multiple doses of epinephrine and atropine in an effort to jumpstart his heart. The heart did not respond. Under standard medical guidelines, a patient displaying zero cardiac response after 40 minutes of field resuscitation is pronounced dead at the scene. However, given Jackson's global stature, the medical team made the call to transport him to the nearest trauma center. At 1:14 p.m., paramedics lifted Jackson's frail body onto a gurney, rushed him down the stairs, and loaded him into the back of LAFD Ambulance 71. Outside the gates of the Carrollwood estate, the scene had descended into chaos. Paparazzi photographers on motorcycles and news helicopters overhead swarmed the gates. As the ambulance pulled out onto Sunset Boulevard with lights and sirens blaring, a lead photographer from TMZ captured a grainy, high-contrast photograph through the rear window of the ambulance showing Sanef performing chest compressions on Jackson's lifeless body. That single image was uploaded to the internet within minutes, sending a shockwave across the globe. At 1:31 p.m., Ambulance 71 backed into the emergency bay at the UCLA Medical Center in Westwood. A team of top emergency physicians, cardiologists, and surgeons was waiting. For the next 55 minutes, the medical team fought to restore life. They deployed an intra-aortic balloon pump, administered advanced resuscitation drugs, and continued chest compressions. It was useless. The biological reality was absolute. Brain tissue dies after 4 to 6 minutes without oxygen. Jackson had been without oxygen for over 2 hours. At 2:26 p.m. on Thursday, June 25, 2009, the lead attending physician stopped the resuscitation efforts and officially pronounced Michael Joseph Jackson dead at the age of 50. Within minutes, news servers around the world began to crash. Traffic on Wikipedia, Twitter, news portals, and search engines rose to unprecedented levels, causing massive regional outages across the internet. The public narrative was that the King of Pop had suffered a sudden, tragic heart attack during the stressful lead-up to his comeback tour. But as the hospital room cleared, investigators from the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office and LAPD Robbery Homicide Division were entering 10,000 Carrollwood Drive. What they discovered inside that second-floor master bedroom was not the site of a natural medical emergency. They found a room stripped of medical records, a missing computer hard drive, hidden canvas bags packed with empty vials of propofol, and a body carrying a lethal concentration of a surgical anesthetic that should never have been there. The story of a sudden heart attack was about to disintegrate. A forensic homicide investigation had just begun. The death of Michael Jackson was broadcast to the world as a sudden, shocking tragedy, a sudden heart attack that felled an icon on the verge of a historic comeback. But as the forensic evidence was laid bare, the myth gave way to a cold, mechanical reality. Michael Jackson did not die from a sudden turn of fate. He died at the intersection of crushing corporate leverage, severe physiological deprivation, and gross medical negligence. For Dr. Conrad Murray, the bedroom at Carrollwood Drive marked the end of his medical career and the beginning of a criminal trial that captured global attention. In November 2011, a Los Angeles jury found Murray guilty of involuntary manslaughter. The court cited his decision to administer a lethal dose of a surgical anesthetic in an unmonitored residential setting, paired with his fatal 82-minute failure to call emergency services, as a severe departure from the standard of care. He was sentenced to 4 years in state prison, the maximum allowed by law, and served 2 years before his release, his medical licenses permanently revoked. Yet, Murray was only one gear in a vast, unrelenting machine. The $400 million debt, the unyielding 50-show contract, and the systemic pressure to force an exhausted, emaciated 50-year-old onto the stage created an environment where safety was compromised for survival. Michael Jackson spent his life attempting to master the global stage, only to be consumed by the very empire he built. The story doesn't end with the closing of the UCLA emergency room doors. Part 3 explores the explosive police interrogation tapes, the high-stakes involuntary manslaughter trial of Dr. Conrad Murray, and the multi-billion-dollar civil courtroom war against AEG Live. Subscribe to Nocturne Archives and turn on notifications so you don't miss Part 3, The Trial and the Reckoning. If you found this forensic deep dive compelling, hit the like button and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Was Conrad Murray solely responsible, or was he merely a scapegoat for a larger corporate machine?